Good morning. First of all, I think give yourself a hand that you have braved the cold and you've been to church. Those online, shame on you. No, there's grace, there's grace. So today we're starting a new sermon series called Reset. Today's sermon is called Practice Makes Perfect. And in weeks to come, we'll be speaking about dreaming again, fearing less, being called to purpose. And so when I started thinking about the word reset, the first thing that came to mind was, unfortunately, rugby, Marinus. When the scrum is unstable or falls, the referee will call to reset the scrum. So reset is put into place for protection. We reset when we see things are going to go bad, if we are wise. But if we wait too long, we have to reset because things have gone bad. And I'm reminded of a movie a couple of years ago, The Butterfly Effect. Anybody seen The Butterfly Effect? Yes, a couple of. The young people, it's like before their time, but they've seen it. Ashton Kutcher in his prime. And so the whole premise is that things have gone badly. And so the protagonist, the hero of the story, can go back in time. He's got the ability, and he tries to change the future by changing the decisions at that point in time. But it doesn't work. Every single time it produces new complications. So he's not able to reset the present time. And that's why the sermon, I think, is so important today. Because there's a lot of us that want to go back in time to certain points. Please just drop the gains. Go back in time, and we want to try and reset. Because we can think back of so many places that we messed up, so many things that could be different if we had made a different decision. And unfortunately, it cannot be so. But if we see things are unstable, we can reset things right now. And so we can't change the past, but we can affect the future. And we can do that because we have a God that we serve that lives inside us, that is all powerful, and we have a hope in Him. And He empowers us to be able to reset. And it takes one little thing: humility. One little thing. And so today we're going to look at one person in the Bible. We're going to look in John chapter 21. If you guys want a page there, it'll be on the board behind me. I'll be reading out of the ESV. The board is the NIV. So when they had finished breakfast, verse 15, Jesus said to Simon Peter, son of John, do you love me more than these? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, feed my lambs. He said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he said, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said, tend my sheep. He said to him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was grieved because he had said it to him a third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you're old, you will stretch out your hand, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. After this, he said to him, follow me. And Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them, the one who had been reclining at the table close to him, and had said, Lord, who is it that is going to betray you? When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, Lord, what about this man? And Jesus said to him, if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. So I love this historical figure called Peter, because I believe that every single one of us, at some point, has a little bit of Peter inside of us. Who here has never been stubborn? Yeah. He's stubborn. He's excitable. He's rash. He's outspoken. He always puts his mouth in it. He's always in front of the others. And he messes up regularly. You read the Gospels, Peter's messing up like every fifth chapter. And I think it's because he missed something in that first 3.5 years of walking with Jesus. He didn't understand the grace of God. He didn't receive the grace of God, and he didn't live in the grace of God. And I believe that's the reason why so many of us battle today. So many of the issues we deal with in ourselves, with God, and with other people is because we don't understand, receive, and live in God's grace. I mean, here's Peter. He'd seen more than most of the disciples. He'd seen the bread and he'd seen the fish. He'd seen the blind men healed. He'd seen the deaf restored. He'd seen leprosy healed. But he was also the guy that walked on water with Jesus. He was also the guy that Jesus pulled into a bedroom and he saw Jesus raise a girl to life. And so the day before things go pear-shaped, Jesus is standing in the garden. He's telling the 12 that they will betray him and they will run away. And of course, Peter is the one that says, no ways. Can you imagine? He's telling God, you're wrong. Sister, have you thought about that? And God says, no, you'll deny me 3 times. And that happens exactly so. And at this point in Jesus' life, when he really needed a friend, the worst day in the life of Jesus, when he's put upon that cross, Peter denies him. Probably the biggest mistake in the Bible. Worst day of Peter's life. The word says that when he realized what he had done, he wept bitterly. He knew he'd messed up. He knew he'd missed the heart of God in that moment. But what happens here is Jesus gets raised to life by the power of the Holy Spirit, and then he ends up on this beach. And the word says that he was standing next to a fire, which I love because Peter denied Jesus next to a fire. And he looks across the water and they're busy fishing. And he calls out to them, have you caught anything? They say no, they don't recognize Jesus. And then he tells them, throw your nets to the other side. And so they catch 156 fish. The nets wanted to break, the boats wanted to capsize, and when they caught that amount of fish, they knew. And so they said, that is the Lord. And when they said that, Peter, who had taken off his robe, grabbed his robe and jumped into the water to get to Jesus. While the others rowed, he got there quickly. And then we get this passage. What would your conversation with Peter have sounded like? I know we try to say, I would have had sympathy for the guy. But the truth is, most of us would have probably had something like, oh, now you show up. But Jesus doesn't do that. Jesus gives him breakfast. They have a meal together. So you know Jesus is African, right? They ate together. And then he has a conversation. And in that conversation, he once points back to Peter's mistake. Not once. Who of us can say that in a disagreement with someone in our whole life, we've never pointed back? Chooses grace above anything else. And this is the first practice that we need to get into. Practice makes perfect, what we say, but it's not completely true because practice makes permanent. If you don't practice the correct thing, you will enforce the bad thing. Graham will tell you, you enforce a bad swing, you'll have a bad swing in golf for the rest of your life. Na Graham? Hy sukkel nog steeds, moet jy. We need to practice the correct thing. When I got married to my wife, or even before we got married, in 7 years of marriage, we've had 1 or 2, I wouldn't call them fights, disagreements, but that was the one fight we've had before we got married. And when we got together, she started to apologize, and I had to stop her. And I said, please allow me. Because I knew at that moment God was speaking to me and saying, you are now putting a foundation in place. And if you don't go to your wife in humility and tell her that you messed up, you're laying the foundation for your whole marriage. And I believe God did something in our marriage that day, even before we said our vows, that we started practicing the right thing. And I started practicing the right thing as a man in that marriage. And she extended grace. And I believe we have to practice these things. We have to practice extending grace. Extend grace. Our first reaction should be grace. Our first reaction should not be judgment. Because the God that we serve did not come to us with judgment. The God that we serve came to us with grace. The God that we serve went to the cross bearing our judgment. We have no right to judge. The Bible said, judge one another as the church. Not to judge, but to point people to Jesus. To correct in love and grace. Give people what they don't deserve, like God did with us. The second thing is, we must practice resetting our relationships. 3 times Jesus asks Peter, do you love me? And it says by the 3rd time he was grieved. But Jesus' heart was not to hurt Peter. The heart of Jesus was to pull Peter's heart back to his. And so he asks him, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you know that's all that Jesus keeps asking us? Every day, all the Holy Spirit does is ask, do you love me? Do you love me, Tim? Do you love me, Johan? Do you love me, Martinet? Do you love me? Do you love me? He asks him in the end, he says, do you love me more than these? Now that's a bit vague, it's open to interpretation. He could have been asking, looking behind him, do you love me more than the boats, more than the fishing? In our context it would be, do you love me more than your job, more than your career, more than your business, more than your studies? Do you love me more than these? He could have been looking at the other disciples and said, do you love me more than these? Do you love me more than the other relationships in your life? Do you love me more than your spouse? Do you love me more than your kids? More than your parents? More than your best friend? Do you love me more than these? Well, it just could have been, am I the main priority in your life, Peter? Am I the one thing Jesus